The courtroom hushed as the doors creaked open. An old black man in shackles shuffled inside, every step echoing a betrayal deeper than any crime. They didn't just bind his wrists, they bound the hands that once saved lives from rooftops in Fallujah. And just as the judge raised her gavel, the rear doors burst open, and an admiral nobody expected walked in. The crowd outside the federal courthouse was loud and divided, their chants slicing the summer air like opposing waves. Reporters jockeyed for position, cameras flashing, microphones shoved toward anyone with an opinion. Inside, the noise faded into a cold silence. A bailiff opened the heavy oak door at the back of the courtroom and shuffled Chief Petty Officer Elijah Kane, retired, decorated sniper, former SEAL Team 2 operative, and a man who'd served his country in 3 wars. His dress blues had been stripped away, replaced with an orange jumpsuit 2 sizes too big. His wrists and ankles were shackled, the metal biting into skin once calloused from rifle grips and parachute cords. People didn't know whether to look at him or look away. Some veterans stood as a show of respect, others sat rigid with disbelief. Cameras were banned inside, but sketch artists captured every line of his weathered face. The salt and pepper beard, the glint of defiance in eyes dulled only by time, not by regret. His walk was slow, but not broken. Every step, deliberate, calculated. Even in chains, Kane moved like a man who knew where every exit was, and how to use them if needed. He took his seat at the defense table, nodding once at his assigned public defender, a fresh-faced attorney named Davis, who looked like he still believed in the system. Judge Elaine Thompson entered, her robes trailing authority behind her. "This court is now in session." Kane didn't move, didn't blink. "Chief Petty Officer Elijah Kane," she began, her voice measured. "You are charged with multiple counts of violating national security protocols, willful insubordination, and the unauthorized removal of classified intelligence. How do you plead?" The room tensed. Kane said nothing. "Mr. Kane?" the judge asked again. His public defender whispered, "Sir, we should—" But Kane only looked forward, silent. In the gallery, a few seats back, former members of Kane's unit sat with stiff backs and tight jaws. Men like Marcus Holt, who had followed Kane through minefields in Kandahar, like Luis Menendez, who owed the man his life twice over. "This doesn't make sense," Menendez whispered. "Kane wouldn't go rogue. Not him." "He must have found something," Holt replied under his breath. "Something they didn't want found." Kane's silence dragged. "I will not ask again," the judge said. "You are not above the law." And then, boom! The double doors at the back of the courtroom swung open with thunder. Gasps rippled across the room. In stepped Admiral Silas Monroe, Chief of Naval Operations, imposing, stoic, and rarely seen outside Pentagon walls. He walked slowly, his presence demanding silence like gravity demands weight. Behind him, suited agents flanked both sides of the aisle. CIA, ONE, Internal Affairs. "Your Honor," Monroe said without waiting for permission, "I request an immediate private counsel with the court and both counsels regarding classified operations pertinent to this case." Judge Thompson blinked. "Admiral Monroe, you're interrupting federal proceedings." "I understand," he cut in, "and I also understand that if this court proceeds without reviewing what I'm about to present, every person in this room may be held criminally liable under Military Code 47C. A murmur ran through the room like electricity. The judge hesitated, then nodded once. "Recess, 30 minutes. Bailiff, clear the courtroom." As everyone filed out, Kane and Monroe locked eyes. Nothing was said. But something passed between them. Something old. Something buried. Something that no courtroom was ready to hear. 2 years earlier. Eastern Afghanistan. The wind howled low through the canyons of Nuristan like a whisper from the dead. Through his scope, Chief Elijah Kane tracked movement across a dusty compound tucked into the side of a jagged cliff. His hands were steady, though his knees ached in the dirt. "Eyes on the primary structure," Kane whispered into his throat mic. "No flag, no ID. Too much traffic for a farming operation. This is it." He was crouched beneath a rock ledge on Overwatch Ridge, perched like a vulture with a Remington MSR rifle snug against his shoulder. Across from him, watching through thermal binoculars, was his spotter, Senior Chief Will Coulter, a younger SEAL with a sharp tongue and something to prove. "Thermal's red too hot," Coulter said. "They're packing way more bodies than the intel suggested." "How many?" Kane asked. "Easily 30 in the central barracks. Another 10 scattered." Kane exhaled slowly. The mission was supposed to be a recon, observe and confirm. Their objective, locate and identify a rogue U.S. paramilitary group known only by its call sign, Shadow V. Word was they'd gone dark 6 months earlier and had since turned into something more sinister. Washington didn't want their fingerprints on this. Kane had his suspicions why. "All teams hold position," Kane ordered into comms. "Maintain visual. No movement unless I say." "Copy that," came the voice of Petty Officer Clark Rivera, leader of the backup team stationed to the west. Kane switched channels. "Base Command, this is Echo 01. Do you copy?" Static buzzed, followed by a terse voice. "Echo 01, this is Base. Go ahead." "We've confirmed Shadow V presence at Grid 2419, requesting elevation of mission status from recon to active engagement. Potential illegal detainment of non-combatants." There was a long pause. Too long. Then, "Negative, Echo 01. Maintain current orders. Surveillance only. Do not engage." Kane frowned. "Base, be advised. We have visual on non-military bodies, possibly prisoners. This site's not just a hideout. It's a holding camp. Some of them might be children." "Echo 01. Acknowledged. Do not engage. Await further instruction." Then the line went dead. Kane stared at the receiver. "That didn't sound like an answer," Coulter said. Kane's silence said everything. He scanned the compound again. Figures in civilian clothing moved in and out of a reinforced steel door on the south wall. One man, bald with a snake tattoo coiled up his neck, Urani, dragged a woman by the arm. She resisted. He struck her. Hard. Kane's jaw tightened. "Look, Chief, we don't have the go-ahead. This is way above our pay grade." Kane didn't respond. He flipped open a side compartment on his scope. Inside, tucked away in a small steel chamber, was a high-capacity drive. Encrypted. Secure. Meant to store field evidence for compartmentalized operations. He hit record. "Kane to Echo Team. Begin video documentation. Prioritize southern wing and exterior transport routes." "You think Command's not gonna like this?" Coulter muttered. "I think Command already knows." Kane's instinct had rarely failed him. 32 years in the Navy. 15 on the ground in some of the world's most unstable war zones, and every now and then, like this moment, it was like he could smell deception before it had a name. And this mission stank. Across the canyon, Rivera's voice came over comms again. "Chief, something's moving below. 2 trucks just pulled in from the pass. Plates are blank. Heavy escort." Kane focused his scope. The vehicles were matte black, American build, not military, private. He knew the kind. Black River Security. Mercenaries. "God damn it," he muttered. "New orders?" Coulter asked, his tone growing tight. "No," Kane said, the answer coming like steel. "We finish the recording. Then we go in." "You said we don't move without authorization." "We just got it," Kane replied, his voice low. "From our own eyes." He began issuing orders over the secure channel. "Team Bravo, take the high north slope. You'll breach the rear with C4. Charlie Team secures the perimeter." "What's the mission objective?" Rivera asked. Kane's answer was cold and clear. "Extraction of anyone who's breathing. As the team moved into position, Kane uploaded a secure message to a hidden channel buried deep in the Naval Operations Network. It was a fail-safe, encrypted under an alias that even he wasn't supposed to know. 2. Admiral Silas Monroe. Subject: urgent. Unauthorized operation, civilian casualties. Expected attachment, Operation Silverhand. Full recon footage, enclosed. Then Kane whispered to no one, "Let's see who blinks first." The desert night had settled into a deathly stillness. Above, stars watched silently as Chief Elijah Kane and his SEALs prepared to violate direct orders. The plan was surgical. Quiet. Quick. Until it wasn't. Breach in 3, 2, 1. Boom! The explosion on the north wall lit the compound like a flare. Shouts erupted inside, men scrambling for weapons, floodlights cutting through the dark like knives. Kane and Coulter rappelled swiftly down the ridge toward the south entrance. As they reached the wall, Kane felt the earth under his boots tremble with chaos. "Alpha Team, on me," he growled into the mic. Gunfire erupted near the eastern tower, short, controlled bursts. Kane heard Rivera's voice. "Perimeter secure. 2 hostiles down. Moving in." Kane and Coulter reached the steel door they'd seen earlier. It was reinforced, no handle, just a keypad. "Got it," Coulter said, producing a small EMP device from his SAT pouch. He slapped it onto the panel. 3 seconds. The keypad sparked, then went dark. Kane kicked the door open. Inside, the hallway was dim, flickering fluorescent lights above, revealing stains on the concrete floor. Some old, some fresh. The walls were marked not with military signage, but crude warnings. Level 2 entry denied, and quarantine restricted access. They moved fast, clearing each room. First came the cells, 12 of them. Inside were civilians in varying states of trauma. 2 older men with missing teeth and sunken cheeks, a teenage boy with bruises around his wrists, a woman cradling a child who looked barely alive. "Jesus Christ," Coulter whispered. Kane turned to the radio. "Command, this is Echo 01. We've confirmed multiple detainees. Civilian status verified. Medical extraction required. Immediate." No response. Just static. Kane tried again. "Command, do you read?" Still nothing. He lowered the radio slowly. "We're cut off." They continued through the hallway, passing what looked like makeshift medical bays, metal cots, bloodied sheets, open trays of instruments, syringes filled with unmarked compounds. "Chief," Coulter said suddenly, holding up a laptop he'd found open on a desk. "You need to see this." Kane leaned in. On the screen were folders, project logs, timestamps, DNA sequencing data, footage files. He opened one. It showed a man, Afghan, early 20s, strapped to a gurney. A masked figure injected him with something. His body convulsed violently. After several minutes, he stopped moving. The time code ended with the words, "Subject expired. Trial 416. Kane felt the bile rise in his throat. He backed out of the file and inserted the secure drive from his scope into the laptop. "Copy everything," he told Coulter. "We're blowing the lid off this." Suddenly, Coulter's comm crackled. "This is Rivera. We've got hostiles inbound. 3 black trucks just hit the compound from the north. Heavily armed, no insignia. This ain't Taliban." Kane's blood went cold. "Black River," he muttered. "Move, now." They began evacuating the prisoners, Coulter and Rivera's men carrying the weak, stabilizing the wounded. It wasn't a clean extraction. Some detainees could barely walk. Kane heard the first RPG hit somewhere in the eastern corridor. The building shook. Smoke filled the air. He moved faster, guiding a limping teenager down the hallway when a shout came from behind. "Chief!" He turned. Coulter stood in the doorway, rifle raised. Not at a target, but at someone entering the hallway. Lieutenant Randall Shaw, Navy Intelligence Liaison. Kane hadn't seen him since their pre-op briefing a week earlier. "Drop your weapon," Coulter barked. Shaw stepped forward, arms raised, but he didn't look afraid. "Kane," he said, calm as a man in a boardroom, "you need to stop this. Right now." Kane narrowed his eyes. "What are you doing here, Shaw?" "This was never your mission," Shaw replied. "This facility is under the jurisdiction of Joint Special Access Command. You're interfering in operations you don't understand." "They're torturing civilians," Kane shouted. "They're test subjects," Shaw corrected coldly. "Volunteers detained with regional authority. Everything happening here is authorized under Black Directive 218. "You're lying." "Then tell me why Admiral Monroe hasn't stopped me." Kane stepped forward. "I don't care what signatures you have or what flag you're hiding behind. This ends now. These people are coming with us." Shaw's expression darkened. "You're making a career-ending mistake." Kane raised his weapon. "Then I guess I'm done with careers." That was when the ceiling exploded. The blast separated Kane and Coulter from Shaw as flames erupted through the hallway. Dust filled the air, choking them both. "Coulter, on your 6!" But when Kane looked over his shoulder, Coulter was gone. Through the smoke, he caught one last glimpse of Shaw disappearing into a side passage, his retreat almost casual. Kane didn't follow. He dragged the teenager toward the evacuation corridor. Outside, a Blackhawk descended under cover of gunfire. Rivera waved them in. Kane loaded the last civilian onto the bird, then turned back toward the building, and froze. Coulter lay just beyond the blast radius, barely conscious, blood trailing from his forehead. Kane grabbed him, dragging him into the chopper seconds before the second explosion rocked the compound. As they lifted off, Kane held Coulter's hand in his own and stared down at the burning complex. Something massive had just begun, and someone powerful didn't want it to ever see daylight. The doors to the judge's chamber closed with a dull thud that seemed louder than it should have been. The room was tense. Judge Elaine Thompson sat at the head of a long mahogany table, flanked by U.S. Attorney Dale Merriman, Elijah Kane's court-appointed public defender, Nathan Davis, and most notably, Admiral Silas Monroe, who stood tall, his uniform sharp, and his presence as dense as armor. Silas Monroe had been in more war rooms than courtrooms, but he knew how power functioned in both. "Admiral," Judge Thompson began, adjusting her glasses, "you interrupted a federal arraignment under the claim of a classified conflict of interest. Start talking." Monroe reached into his briefcase and pulled out a manila folder sealed with a black naval intelligence stamp. "I am here under direct authorization from the Office of the Chief of Naval Operations and the Joint Special Operations Command," he said. "Chief Kane's actions are part of a covert operation that went so far off book, not even the Pentagon has the full story. But I do, because I sent him." Judge Thompson's brow furrowed. "You sent him where, exactly?" "To confirm what others were afraid to admit existed," Monroe said. "A rogue bioweapons project operating under the false cover of counterinsurgency. It involved illegal detainment, human experimentation, and off-the-record partnerships with a private contractor, Black River Security." Merriman leaned forward, his voice crisp with disbelief. "With all due respect, Admiral, if what you're saying is true, why was Kane arrested? Why hasn't this been brought to the Intelligence Committee, the DOJ, or—" "It was," Monroe interrupted. "It was buried. Redacted. Everyone with clearance to act was either paid off or reassigned." He slid the folder across the table toward the judge. "This is the original field report submitted by Kane 48 hours after Operation Silverhand, accompanied by video evidence. The Navy classified it above top secret under Executive Compartmental Code, Ghost Shell." Judge Thompson hesitated before opening it. What she saw inside made her lips part slightly. Photos of a bombed-out compound, infrared stills of human heat signatures huddled in containment rooms, medical scans of individuals with traces of experimental viral compounds in their bloodstream. Notes scribbled in Kane's own hand. She flipped to the back. 2 names stood out under a heading marked Black River, Civilian Experiments Oversight. Lieutenant Randall Shaw, Senator Paul V. Haskins. She looked up. A sitting U.S. Senator? Not just sitting, Monroe replied. Chair of the Intelligence Appropriations Subcommittee. Every classified dollar flows through his office. U.S. Attorney Merriman shook his head. None of this changes the legal reality. Kane violated orders. He breached a federal compound. He used his clearance to access servers that were documenting war crimes, Monroe snapped. What would you have had him do? Wait for someone to tell him it was okay to stop a crime? Let civilians be tortured for intel modeling? Let a little girl die because protocol said to observe and report? Silence followed. Davis, Kane's public defender, finally spoke. Your Honor, with this context, I request all charges against my client be dismissed immediately. He was operating under exigent circumstances that demanded action. The law allows for moral necessity when chain of command has failed. But the judge didn't respond immediately. She was staring at a photo clipped to the back of Kane's mission report. A little girl, 6 years old, holding Kane's hand in the extraction chopper. Her face bruised but alive. You knew about this? She asked Admiral Monroe quietly. Back then? I knew something was wrong, he admitted. But I didn't know what. Kane confirmed it, and I've spent the last 2 years trying to protect the data he recovered and him from people who want this buried. Why now? Merriman asked. Because they stopped waiting to silence him quietly, Monroe said. They arrested him publicly, shackled him during a Medal of Honor recommendation. That wasn't law, it was a warning, a threat to anyone else thinking of coming forward. Judge Thompson exhaled sharply. This court was nearly made complicit in a political assassination disguised as justice. She turned to Davis. Request for dismissal is noted. However, this court no longer has the jurisdiction to proceed until a full federal inquiry is initiated. And Kane? Davis asked. The judge looked up. Her expression was colder now. He'll remain in custody, but not as a defendant, as a protected witness, under the supervision of a federal tribunal. Then she turned to Monroe. You've just pulled the pin on a grenade, Admiral. This will blow back on all of us. Monroe didn't blink. I've survived worse than shrapnel. As they stood to leave, the judge's clerk entered and whispered in her ear. Thompson's face turned pale. What is it? Davis asked. The DOJ building, she said softly. There's been a break-in. Black River, Monroe said under his breath. And they stole... What? Merriman asked. The judge swallowed hard. The original sealed files Kane submitted 2 years ago. The cell was concrete and silence. No windows, no clock, no sense of time except the ache in Elijah Kane's lower back and knees, which told him it was probably long past midnight. He lay on a narrow cot, one leg crossed over the other, hands behind his head. His chains had been removed, for now, but the guard stationed outside never looked away from the feed on his monitor. Kane could feel him watching through the mirrored glass. He didn't mind. He'd lived in smaller boxes before. Submarines, transport crates, body bags he'd played dead inside just to get behind enemy lines. This was just a pause in the mission. He closed his eyes. The girl's face came again, the same one from the extraction in Afghanistan. Her skin yellowed from whatever they'd pumped into her, her arms dotted with injection points. She'd said nothing the whole flight, just clutched his hand with fingers barely strong enough to hold on. I'll get you out, he had whispered. 2 years later, he still wasn't sure if he had. A sharp buzz interrupted the silence. Kane opened his eyes just as the cell door slid open. 2 agents entered. One wore a black tactical suit and mirrored shades even in the dim light. The other was older, more familiar. Rear Admiral Charles Bannister. Kane sat up slowly, giving the younger man a long, unimpressed glance. Bannister waved the agent back out into the hallway. "Give us 10. The door shut again, leaving them alone. Kane spoke first. "Didn't expect you to crawl out of your DC hole for this." "I came to make you an offer." Kane chuckled bitterly. "You read me my charges 2 weeks ago. Now you want a bargain?" "I didn't know," Bannister said quietly. "Not all of it. Monroe's file wasn't distributed through Joint Command. Ghost Shell wasn't even logged through secure naval channels. It was routed through an offshore proxy system." "You mean it was buried," Kane corrected, "because someone didn't want people like you finding it." The Admiral didn't argue. He pulled a USB from his coat pocket and slid it across the metal table. "What's this?" Everything Monroe didn't submit through official channels. Medical reports, thermal scans, personnel logs from the compound, names of civilian detainees, their nationalities, ages. Most were never even reported missing. And one more thing. Kane picked up the drive, turning it over in his hand. "Go on." "Facial recognition hit on a man in the Shadow Vive compound," Bannister said. "American, former DARPA virologist. Name was scrubbed off every public record 7 years ago, but we found a partial ID match." Kane's eyes narrowed. "Who?" Bannister hesitated, then said the name. "Dr. Evan Crawley." Kane went still. Evan Crawley was dead. Died in a lab fire. "No," Bannister said. "He was pulled out and reassigned. Black River's top medical contractor." Kane stood slowly, everything inside him suddenly coiled tight. He'd met Crawley once. Quiet, pale, genius, back when Kane had been part of a joint military intel briefing team reviewing emergent biological warfare programs. Crawley had seemed off even then. "He's the architect," Kane muttered. "He was running Echo. The testing, the injections. He was using those people as trial samples," Bannister finished grimly. There was silence. Then Kane asked, "So why are you giving me this?" "Because someone just leaked your mission footage to the press." Kane raised an eyebrow. "Footage? From the Silver Hand op?" Bannister nodded. "Raw helmet cam feed from your spotter, Coulter. It's on 4 international news sites already. Anonymous leak. Videos time-stamped, GPS matched. Shows you pulling prisoners out of the facility. Children, wounded civilians. One shot of you giving CPR to a man with chemical burns." Kane exhaled, his pulse kicking. "And? The world just saw a decorated Navy SEAL risk his life to stop a war crime his own country was committing. Twitter's already melting down. Hashtags trending. Global Human Rights Commission issued a statement 10 minutes ago." A beat. "Your case just went radioactive." Kane gave a slow nod, absorbing it, then asked, "And Coulter?" Bannister's mouth tightened. "Officially? Missing in action." Kane's jaw clenched. "Unofficially?" "Unofficially," Bannister said, reading his mind. "I think Black River got to him before he could testify." Kane looked at the USB in his hand, then at the Admiral. "You want me to flip?" he said flatly. "Use this to burn everyone. Haskins, Crawley, Black River, and in return, what?" "Your name cleared. Your pension reinstated. A Medal of Honor, maybe. Quiet retirement. All off the books." Kane smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Hell of a deal. Problem is," he slid the USB back across the table. "I don't want off the books." Bannister raised an eyebrow. Kane stepped closer, voice low and sharp. "I want everything they did dragged into the sunlight. Names read out loud in front of Congress, video playing on repeat in the UN. I want little girls like Farah to know that somebody burned their reputation to defend theirs." He stepped back. "So take that drive. And tell your friends." His voice hardened. "Kane doesn't bargain." It started as a flicker. A grainy video uploaded to an obscure military watchdog site. No context, no commentary, Just 4 minutes and 22 seconds of helmet cam footage. Elijah Kane dragging a boy with burned legs through smoke. Kane lifting a limp woman into a med-evac helicopter while Black River gunships fired from the ridge. Kane diving onto a child's body as a wall exploded behind them. At first it was buried beneath the noise, but then a freelance journalist in Berlin picked it up. Then a retired Navy combat medic posted it on Twitter. Then a trending tag appeared on every major platform. Silverhand Truth. Within hours, cable news anchors were scrambling over each other to break the story. We're looking at what appears to be leaked footage from a classified military operation in Afghanistan. This man, identified as Chief Petty Officer Elijah Kane, was scheduled to receive the Medal of Honor before being arrested on espionage charges. Yeah, is this the Pentagon's worst scandal since Abu Ghraib? By 10 a.m., every newsroom had assigned a special team to dig deeper. And by noon, Kane's face was on every screen in America. DOJ National Security Division. Conference Room 14B, Camille Harris stood at the window, arms crossed, watching the chaos unfold on the television screen mounted in the corner. Behind her, the room buzzed. Emails pinged. Phones rang non-stop. Legal aides and mid-level investigators paced like ants over a grenade they couldn't defuse. I warned them, she muttered. Told them this case wasn't what it looked like. Her supervisor, Deputy Director Frank Wilson, slammed a file onto the table. You went outside the chain of command, he growled. You contacted Admiral Monroe directly. You leaked sealed transcripts to a Senate aide. Camille turned slowly. I followed the facts. You compromised a national security investigation. No, she snapped. I exposed one. Wilson's jaw tightened. You're done here, Agent Harris. She stepped forward. Good. Then I'm free to speak publicly. Careful, he said, voice quiet but dangerous. You make this personal. They'll bury you next to Kane. Camille didn't flinch. I already made it personal, she said, when they arrested him in front of his grandchildren. She grabbed her bag and left without another word. Elsewhere. Secure room, Capitol Hill. Senator Paul V. Haskins sat with a tumbler of bourbon, watching the video play again. And again. The footage wasn't just damning, it was visceral. Too real to spin. He tapped a button on the intercom. Get me Crawley. Dr. Crawley is off grid, sir, his aide replied nervously. Black River's not returning our calls either. Then make them answer. He tossed the glass against the wall, the sound of shattering crystal sharp and final. Inside a low-lit room filled with glowing monitors, Director Julia Von Kessler reviewed satellite feeds, security cam hacks, and social sentiment heat maps. On screen, Camille Harris exiting the DOJ building. She tapped her comm. Asset Bravo 1, priority target is in motion. Camille Harris, shadow her. Intervene only if she attempts to transmit files to the media. Another screen showed Kane in his cell, pacing. Asset Alpha remains isolated. Monitoring continues. A tech turned to her, hesitant. Ma'am, with this footage out, shouldn't we initiate glass-down protocols? No, Kessler said coldly. The leak is a spark, but not the fire. She leaned closer. Silverhand was just the beginning, and Kane is still the fuse. Kane sat at the small metal desk now, listening to the distant echo of footsteps in the corridor outside. Then, a tap at the door. He turned. A keycard swiped, the lock clicked, and in stepped a woman in plain clothes with intense eyes and a briefcase tucked beneath one arm. Chief Kane, she said, I'm with the Office of Military Whistleblower Protection. Kane raised an eyebrow. Took your time. She smiled slightly. I'm not the cavalry. I'm the insurance policy. She opened the briefcase. Inside, a phone, a laptop, a small photo of Kane and his original SEAL unit. And beneath it all, a single sealed envelope marked Operation Iron Coin, Declassification Draft Pending Review. Kane looked up. What's this? She handed it to him. Your story, unredacted. Everything from Silverhand to Ghost Shell, ready for release. One more trigger pull, and this becomes public record. Kane didn't speak for a long time. Finally, he said, So what's the catch? You'll need to testify, she replied. Before the UN, not just Congress. They're opening an emergency tribunal on war crimes related to bioweapon experimentation. They want you there. They need a soldier with blood on his boots and truth in his hands. Kane picked up the envelope, and for the first time since the courtroom, he let a sliver of emotion show. Not rage, not bitterness, but purpose. I'll testify, she nodded. Then the war's not over, Chief. No, Kane said. It's just getting started. A thunderstorm rolled in over the Potomac. The lightning wasn't the loudest thing that night. That title belonged to the pounding in Admiral Monroe's chest as he paced the dim living room of the safe house, an unremarkable brick townhouse rented under a fake name. A war room now. Elijah Kane sat at the table, arms crossed, studying a grainy satellite map projected onto the wall. His beard was grayer, his body slower, but his eyes? Still sharp enough to cut steel. Across from him, Camille Harris worked furiously at her laptop. Hardwired, no Wi-Fi, scrubbed 3 times by an NSA contractor who now lived under an alias in Vermont. Admiral Monroe rubbed his forehead. The UN tribunal convenes in 48 hours. If we don't get you to Geneva before then, they'll close the inquiry and seal the records. Kane glanced at the map. Which means everything we've uncovered disappears. Worse, Camille thought, but didn't say it aloud. It meant the 17 remaining survivors of Operation Silverhand, the ones they had scattered into safe houses across Europe, would be fair game again. With no testimony and no evidence, they'd vanish like ghosts. She looked at the screen again. A green dot blinked on a flight path from DC to Zurich. Flight Plan 5 Alpha. Cleared under diplomatic cover. Departure in 9 hours. I've got a jet, Camille said. Non-civilian airstrip, black flight registered to a NATO liaison office. But if they even suspect where it's going, they'll intercept, Kane finished. Drone strike if we're lucky. Disappearance if we're not. Silence. The only sound was rain hammering the windows. Then Monroe broke it. There's a second option. Camille looked up. I've been holding it as a last resort, he said, sliding a USB across the table. Inside, operation records and secure testimony logs. If we don't make it out, this gets released to every major press outlet and 4 heads of state with power to invoke international legal proceedings. Camille examined the drive. And if it gets intercepted? It's encrypted with a time-locked trigger. Unless it's uploaded through a specific protocol, it wipes itself. One chance. Kane tapped the table. Then we move now. Camille hesitated. We're not ready. Kane's voice turned low and even. Neither were the civilians we found in that hellhole. But I didn't wait then. I'm not waiting now. Her eyes met his. In that look she understood. He wasn't doing this for revenge, or redemption, or recognition. He was doing it because people like him had always been told to shut up and serve. And this time, he was done being silent. Camille nodded. Then we leave in 60 minutes. Wheels up by dawn. The walls of the room were soundproof, the lighting dim and clinical. Haskins stood at the head of a long conference table. Around him, 5 men and women with badges, clearances, and absolutely no official titles. One of them was Lawrence Pierce, CEO of Black River Security. They've activated a transport route, Pierce said. Bethesda to Andrews Air Base, then Geneva. Confirmation? Haskins asked. Positive ID on all 3. Kane, Monroe, Harris. And the files? They're carrying a drive. Failsafe encryption. We believe it's programmed to release Silverhand data worldwide if triggered. Haskins looked toward the man seated at the end of the table. Bald, clean-shaven, dressed like a banker. Your team ready? Yes, the man said. We'll intercept them en route. Silent takedown. Minimal footprint. We eliminate the witnesses, recover the driefs, and suppress the fallout. Good, Haskins said. No loose ends. He turned away from the table. Make it look like an accident. And remind Director Kessler, this is what she was hired for. Kane stood at the mirror. He tugged on the collar of his old uniform jacket. Not dress blues, but the combat-grade coat he'd worn during Silverhand. Threadbare, sun-bleached, torn near the shoulder. He had asked Camille to find it from evidence storage. She had. He didn't wear it for nostalgia. He wore it for war. You sure about this? Camille asked from the doorway. Kane looked at her in the mirror. No. Then he turned. But it's the first time in 40 years I've felt like the mission actually matters. Camille smiled sadly. You could have taken the pardon, the promotion, the ceremony. Kane stepped past her toward the door. Only thing I ever wanted was to walk away knowing I didn't lie to save someone else's lie. He reached for his sidearm. Empty holster, of course. He gave her a look. You didn't bring a weapon? I brought truth, she said. Figured you already had the fight. He laughed. Not bitter, not angry, but ready. They exited through the back. Monroe waited by the SUV, engine humming, satellite tracker disabled. 10 minutes to Andrews, he said. Kane slid into the back seat. Camille climbed in next to him. The sky cracked with thunder again as the SUV rolled into the storm, its lights off, its passengers heading into darkness with only one thing on their side. The truth. The SUV glided down the slick two-lane highway like a shadow with wheels. The storm had broken but left behind a wet silence, the kind Kane recognized from countless combat zones, the quiet before someone pulls the trigger. Elijah Kane sat in the back, eyes fixed on the tree line. He hadn't said a word since they left the safe house. In the front, Camille Harris tapped her phone. She'd been refreshing the same satellite map every 10 seconds. Still clear, she murmured, glancing up at Admiral Monroe behind the wheel. Too clear, Kane said quietly. Camille turned. You think they're already in place? Kane didn't respond. He didn't have to. Up ahead, the road narrowed, a bottleneck section that wound through a thick forest. No traffic, no lights, no motion. Then the GPS unit blinked. Route recalibrating. Monroe frowned. That's not right. The map on Camille's screen shifted. No warning, just a jagged red detour redirecting them down a side road. Halverson Drive, a narrow access route marked private road, military traffic only. She looked back at Kane. Trap, he said immediately. They've hijacked the signal. Monroe killed the headlights and eased the vehicle to a crawl. Options? He asked. Keep going forward. We walk into a kill box, Kane replied. Turn around. They'll close the rear. They're driving us. Camille pulled up her backup GPS feed. Scrambled. Unusable. Kane scanned the trees. There. A flash of movement near mile marker 42. Barely visible. A glint of a rifle scope. A silhouette ducking behind brush. His voice dropped low and calm. Driver. Full stop. Monroe braked. The SUV hissed as it settled on its suspension. Kane opened his door slowly. Then said, Camille, give me the file. What? Give me the drive. They'll aim for you first. No, she protested. Kane's voice left no room for debate. Now. She handed him the sealed USB, its edges still warm from her grip. He tucked it into a hidden pouch behind the lining of his old field jacket, then looked at Monroe. When I say go, you punch it. I'll draw fire. You take her straight to Andrews. Monroe shook his head. I didn't pull you out of retirement so you could die on a two-lane road. Kane gave a tired smile. You didn't pull me out. You just gave me a clear shot. Before either could argue further, the first shot rang out. Crack! The back window shattered. A bullet embedded itself an inch above Camille's head. Kane shoved the door open, rolled out onto the wet pavement, and opened fire. Crack, crack, crack. 3 shots. 3 targets went down in the woods. Automatic fire erupted from the tree line. Suppressed rifles, high caliber. Professional. "They're here!" Camille shouted. "Punch it!" Kane roared. Monroe slammed the gas. The SUV surged forward, swerving around debris that had been intentionally laid to look like storm damage. More gunfire peppered the road. Kane sprinted parallel to the SUV, using the trees as cover. He moved like a ghost, dropping targets with precision. 1 shot, 1 body. He reached a fallen log and ducked behind it, reloading. A voice crackled over a radio nearby. "Subject Kane engaged. Secondary targets in transit. Do we intercept the vehicle?" Another voice responded. "Negative. Priority 1. Eliminate Kane. Recover the drive." Kane smiled to himself. "Guess I still matter." He rolled to the side, tossed a flashbang toward the origin of the voice, and covered his ears. Boom! He moved again, firing 2 shots as he charged through the dazed perimeter. 1 hit armor, the other didn't. Then something caught him, a burst of gunfire to the ribs. Not direct, but glancing. He staggered, then found cover behind a rusted utility truck parked near the roadblock. His breath came in short gasps. His hand went to the inside pocket. Still there. The drive. Even if they killed him here, they wouldn't get it. He dropped flat just as a grenade rolled near his foot. Time slowed. Then, screech! A roar of tires. The SUV had returned. Camille was driving. She leaned out the window, firing one-handed with Monroe braced in the back seat, laying down suppressing fire. "Get in!" she shouted. Kane didn't hesitate. He burst from cover, stumbled once, then dove into the back seat as the SUV fishtailed and tore off. Monroe pulled him upright. "You're hit." "I'm fine," Kane lied, blood leaking through his jacket. They raced through the last mile of forest. Behind them, a fire bloomed. Camille had run over a trip mine, but it had detonated late, missing them by seconds. Up ahead, the security gate to Andrews Air Base. Floodlights flared. Guards raised weapons, then lowered them as Monroe held up his badge and shouted code clearance. The SUV slid to a stop just as a C-21 jet taxied into view, its ramp descending. Kane clutched the pouch beneath his jacket. The drive was still safe. But for how long? Geneva was cold and overcast, the kind of sky that held its breath. Inside a secured annex of the United Nations Human Rights Commission, Chief Elijah Kane stood in front of a full-length mirror, adjusting the collar of a borrowed civilian suit. His uniform had been shredded during the ambush. This would have to do. His ribs were bruised, his left arm stiff, and the bandage under his shirt itched like hell. But he was alive, and he had made it. Behind him, Camille Harris paced the hallway, one hand clutching a dossier, the other gripping a burner phone. She was talking to someone important. 3 more verified witnesses just arrived, refugees from the Silverhand facility. Canadian security is protecting them, but they're scared. One of them said someone's been following her since Berlin. If we don't get them sworn in today, she paused, they'll disappear. Like the others. She hung up and turned toward Kane. "You ready?" Kane didn't answer immediately. He was staring at his own reflection, not vainly, but as if trying to decide whether the man looking back was real. "I used to believe justice wore a uniform," he said finally. "Then I learned it wears a mask. Sometimes yours, sometimes mine." Camille walked over, held out a flash drive. "This is the testimony file. You're the lead witness. Everything we've fought for. This is it." He took the drive, slipped it into his inside pocket. "You think the UN really wants the truth?" "No," she said bluntly. "But they won't be able to ignore it once you speak it out loud." He nodded once. "Then let's go ruin someone's career." Rows of diplomats, observers, journalists, and human rights advocates filled the marble hall. Flags of 193 nations lined the walls. At the head of the chamber sat the commission chairwoman, Amira Dasood, a former judge and war crimes prosecutor known for her sharp intellect and intolerance for evasiveness. A court officer stepped forward. The tribunal will now hear testimony regarding Operation Silverhand and its connection to alleged unauthorized human experimentation by entities linked to the United States government. Call your first witness. Kane stepped forward. Cameras flashed. The room buzzed. Please state your name and affiliation. He didn't blink. Chief Petty Officer Elijah Kane, United States Navy, retired. And your role in the events under review? Kane drew a breath. I led the SEAL reconnaissance team assigned to Operation Silverhand, believing it to be a surveillance mission targeting insurgents. But that wasn't the truth, Chairwoman Dasood said, not unkindly. No, ma'am, Kane said. The real objective was a covert operation masking unauthorized biological weapons testing on civilians, conducted by a private security contractor, funded through black budget allocations laundered via congressional subcommittees. A pause. And you have evidence? Kane nodded. He inserted Camille's flash drive into the chamber's secure terminal. Exhibit 1, he said. Helmet cam footage from the compound. Thermal scans, civilian IDs, medical logs, chain of command transcripts, all recovered and verified. Some redacted, some not. The screens around the room lit up. The first image hit like a slap. A gaunt child, barely breathing, hooked to an IV bag labeled with a CDC logo. Gasps echoed across the gallery. More followed. Injection sites, blood tests, infrared footage of guards dragging prisoners from rooms. Then Kane's voice returned on the audio feed. Get them out, now. We're not leaving them behind. The chamber fell silent. Not the hush of boredom or protocol, but a true silence, as if every word spoken next would ripple into history. Then a voice from the rear. Objection. Heads turned. A diplomat from the U.S. delegation stood, flanked by 2 lawyers. We contest the chain of custody for the evidence presented. Furthermore, we object to the characterization of these actions as war crimes without proper legal adjudication within the U.S. justice system. Chairwoman Dasood raised an eyebrow. You may object all you like, sir. This tribunal is not here to honor bureaucracy. It is here to face truth. The gallery erupted in low murmurs. Kane didn't flinch. He stepped back from the microphone. Then he did something unexpected. He pulled a folded photograph from his breast pocket, held it up. The little girl from the compound, Farah, clutched in his arms, eyes hollow but alive. This, he said, his voice steady, is why I'm here. Not for revenge, not for medals, for her, and for the 36 others who didn't get out alive. A moment passed. Then another. Then applause broke from the public gallery, scattered at first, then rising. Not decorum, not diplomacy. Recognition. Chairwoman Dasood gavelled the room. This tribunal will enter recess for 30 minutes, she said. Upon return, we will hear from survivors of Operation Silverhand and consider formal international recommendations. As Kane turned from the podium, Camille reached him in the aisle. You just detonated truth in a room built to contain it. Kane smiled grimly. Let's see who survives the fallout. The screen in front of Lawrence Pierce glowed red. Multiple active feeds, leaked footage trending, Geneva coverage going global. He crushed a half-lit cigar into a crystal ashtray. Beside him, Director Kessler stepped out of the shadows. You said Kane wouldn't make it. Kessler's expression was flat. He wasn't the threat. Pierce turned to her slowly. Then who is? Kessler's eyes shifted toward a flashing feed labeled Whistleblower 07, F. Nasser. Someone who knows where the bodies are buried. She picked up her phone. Let's dig one up. 30 minutes had passed since Chief Elijah Kane gave his testimony. 30 minutes since the world watched him stand, not as a criminal, not even as a soldier, but as a witness who chose integrity over silence. Now, the tribunal had reconvened. Chairwoman Amira Dasood sat beneath the United Nations emblem, flanked by commissioners representing 5 continents. Her gavel rested lightly in her hand, though the weight of what was about to be declared might as well have been made of steel. The tribunal recognizes the gravity of the evidence submitted, she began, and the courage it took to bring it forward. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Cameras panned to Kane, seated beside Camille Harris, with Admiral Monroe just behind them. The world was watching. In reviewing the testimony, video documentation, and witness reports from survivors of the facility known as Site Ember, she looked directly at Kane. This tribunal affirms that Operation Silverhand uncovered evidence of gross human rights violations, including involuntary experimentation on civilians by non-state actors operating with state support. The tribunal also affirms that Chief Petty Officer Elijah Kane acted under moral necessity, in alignment with international law and in defense of human dignity. She raised the gavel. All criminal charges brought against him, both domestic and international, are to be considered null and void. Bang. The gavel fell. Applause erupted, not just polite, but visceral. Some stood. Others wept. Camille grabbed Kane's shoulder. "You did it." He didn't smile. He only whispered, "We did it." Press from around the globe mobbed the marble corridors. A storm of microphones and questions and flashes. Kane moved through it with quiet control, declining interviews, letting the truth speak louder than he could. Near the exit, he paused. A familiar face emerged from the crowd. Farah, the little girl from the compound, now several years older, standing next to her adoptive mother. Her eyes were still solemn, but when she saw Kane, she smiled. He stepped forward, kneeling slowly so his knees wouldn't betray him. "I wasn't sure you'd remember me." Farah nodded. "You said I was safe now." Kane swallowed hard. "I meant it." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper, a child's drawing of a man in a Navy uniform holding a shield over a group of people. "Teacher said draw our heroes." Kane stared at it for a long moment, then handed it back. "No, that's you." A sealed courtroom door swung open at the Department of Justice. Senator Paul V. Haskins was led out in handcuffs, flanked by federal agents. Journalists shouted questions. "Senator, do you deny knowledge of Project Echo? Do you admit to authorizing black budget money for human testing?" His lips were tight, his silence deafening. Simultaneously, Director Kessler was intercepted trying to board a private jet bound for Dubai. She was cuffed before the engines warmed. Her last words, caught on camera. "This won't stop them. You think it ends with me?" But it did start with her, and that was enough. For now. Kane stood at the edge of a freshly carved gravestone. It bore the name Senior Chief Will Coulter, SEAL Team 2, KIA, Operation Silverhand. A small stone sat atop the marker. A SEAL tradition. Kane placed a second beside it. "Sorry it took this long," he murmured. "They tried to bury the truth with you, but it made it out." He stood in silence until Camille joined him. "He would have been proud," she said. "He'd have told me I was crazy," Kane replied, then handed me the rifle. They both smiled. Then she handed him a folded envelope. "What's this?" "Official offer. President wants to give you the Medal of Honor. Publicly, this time." Kane looked at it, then tore it in half. "I don't need a medal to know I did the right thing." He paused. "Give it to the survivors." A lecture hall buzzed with young cadets in uniform. At the podium stood Elijah Kane, sleeves rolled up, speaking without notes. "Rules matter. Orders matter. But sometimes what matters most is the voice in your gut telling you this isn't right. That voice is what kept me alive. It's what saved 37 lives. And it's what nearly got me buried by my own government. He looked at the wide-eyed students. I'm not telling you to rebel. I'm telling you to know the difference between silence and complicity. As the applause began, Kane caught sight of Admiral Monroe in the back row, quietly watching. He nodded once. Kane sat in a rocking chair, a cold tea beside him, the wind whispering through pine trees in the distance. He looked older now, but also unburdened. Camille pulled up in a dusty government sedan. She stepped out, holding a thick manila envelope. UN voted today, she said, handing it to him. Briggs Protocol passed. Kane flipped it open. Resolution 1417. Global Accountability Standards for Private Military Contractors and Covert Operations. They named it after you, he chuckled dryly. Damn, I liked Old Man in Chains better. Camille smirked. You're free now, Kane. For real. He didn't answer. Just rocked back once, then forward again, and whispered to no one in particular. I always was.